So a big round of applause for Orion Ross from Disney.
Thank you. Good morning. Thanks especially to Jam and Animation Dingle for inviting me and welcoming us to this beautiful part of the world where I've never been before. So it's great to be here. The brief that I got for this keynote speech was, tell us about your journey from university to today. So this is a picture of me in university, and this is a picture of me today. So, that's the whole speech, right? There you go. Boom. University today. So I sit in an office and shout at a conference phone, and that's pretty much what I do. I work for the 3 different Disney channels. Most of the content that we make is from the US, but we also make content in Europe. So I'll give you a quick run through the things that we have in production right now, just so you know kind of where we are today. So we're making a show called Paprika with Zealand Animation in Paris. It's about 2 tigers who are brother and sister. Also for preschool, Claude, based on the kids' books by Alex T. Smith and made by the good people of 16 South. PJ Masks from E1, Frogbox, Team Toe. This has been a monster hit for us around the world. It's actually a French show. It's about teamwork. It's an age-appropriate preschool series. Kids love it. Parents love it. We knew, from a month of launching this in the US, by Halloween, kids and parents were making their own costumes. So this was even before somebody cooked up a crazy, cynical franchise plan to sell lots of toys. The audience actually just wanted to engage with the characters, and that was the best early sign that we saw. New preschool series we're working on, Giganosaurus with Cybergroup Studios in France. It's kind of Stand By Me with dinosaurs for preschool. So 4 friends going on adventures. Miraculous Ladybug, we're now working on the 2nd and 3rd seasons of this show. This is for Disney Channel, so for a slightly older audience, but it is a girl superhero. And I think people really identify with the fact that she's very awkward as a normal girl, and then she really kicks ass as a superhero. Freaky Wheels is a new show, which is just delivering now from Gaumont Animation Studios in France, and a great creator called Frederick Martin. It's kind of our greatest cartoony cartoon right now. It's got great posing and expressions and timing, and it's a good, fun comedy. Also working on a show called Best Bugs Forever, about 5 friends who are bugs. Well, one of them is just a mouse who thinks he's a bug, but everyone's cool with that. Space Chickens in Space. I think there's a few people in this room who are working on the show, which is great. This is made partly in Ireland, partly in Australia, partly in Mexico, with directors in Norway. So makes perfect sense for an outer space kind of show, because it's fully global. Sadie Sparks, heard about this last year at the festival. It's looking great from Brown Bag and Cybergroup. And 101 Dalmatian Street is a new series that we have in production right now, which you'll hear more about later. So those are sort of the 10 shows that we have in production right now. These are the people that work on those shows at our office in London, the creative execs and the production execs. So there's Lucy, Calvin, Joe, Shamik, Katie, Nicole, Hannah, other Lucy, Gerardo, Beth, Greg, Tom, Katerina, Divya, and Natalie. Best part of my job, frankly, is getting to work with these people every day who continue to inspire me and do amazing work on all of these shows. How does that really work? So, yeah, here's the short version of my resume. I've now been at Disney for 9 years. Before that, I was at Turner for 7 years, and before that, I was at a company called Star TV for 7 years. I became a British citizen together with my partner, Harvey, in 2015. This was right after our ceremony, so we went and had fish and chips. But Chilligan, but I'm not actually British. I was born in the US. I was born in California. I was brought up as a Dodgers fan because my dad was from LA. We lived in London when I was a kid. This is me and my 2 older brothers outside 10 Downing Street, when you could still go right up to 10 Downing Street. There's me again. I still have the same hat and the same coat. But we moved to Colorado when I was very small. So here we are in Cripple Creek, which is an old mining town. There's lots of snow in Colorado. My dad was a university professor specializing in Shakespeare and also a theater director. And my mom is a painter and a costume designer. So I grew up in a completely theatrical household, and I was routinely cast in small roles. And here I am at Midsummer Night's Dream. The first time I was in Midsummer Night's Dream, I was in Midsummer Night's Dream again in high school. I got to play King of the Fairies, so it was a good kind of promotion. But it was kind of all around. I got smothered in the tower in Richard III. So that was pretty cool. I did like watching cartoons all the time. I was a huge animation fan. As a kid, my hero was Bugs Bunny. I love the fact that Bugs Bunny never hit first, but once he was attacked, he would use humiliation and wit and sometimes drag to basically destroy his enemies by any means necessary. I thought the animation was great, but I also loved the character and the verbal nature of it. I want to say before we go any further that I am not an animator. I have no formal training in animation. I can't draw. So I think I have a really a different journey from some of the other ones that you may hear. And I'll try and take you through some of its twists and turns. I hope you can find it relevant in some way and not too self-indulgent. So this is a game called Exquisite Corpse, which I always like to play, where one person draws the head, one person draws the body, one person draws the feet. This one was actually created by a Turner executive, a Nickelodeon executive, and a Disney executive very late at night in Berlin. But I always liked playing it as a kid. We just called it the head and the body game. So that was kind of cool. I was a good student. I went to Harvard in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I studied English and American language and literature. I specialized in revenge tragedies. I was really into the bloody, schlocky stuff that was produced around the same time as Shakespeare. I did also direct a production of Midsummer Night's Dream. This is Oberon and Puck. We had a motorcycle. We had sex fairies. We had all kinds of modern versions going on. We had a rock band singing music as well. So theater, both as a child and in college, was very formative for me. And the things that I took away from theater were really about that direct connection with the audience. You're in the same room with them, about the deadline, the rush of having to get something on stage when you actually, you've booked the hall, you sold the tickets, the show must go on, even if it's not ready, even if it's crap, you have to do something anyway. And also the community of actors, artists, technicians, all kind of working together to create something in front of an audience. So I still think of all production pretty much in the same way. As theater. I directed a play in 1990 called The Increased Difficulty of Concentration, which is by Václav Havel, the former president of the Czech Republic. It was a great time to be doing it because the wall had just come down and people were really interested, and it was the Velvet Revolution, and that was a good one. One of the best things about the university where I went was that you didn't just have to do the things that were in your major. So I was an English major, but I also studied graphic design from a really great professor called Toshi Katayama. One of the exercises was kind of like design a letter that looks industrial, and also design a letter from your name that looks like something organic, like it could be from a zoo or some sort of eco-reserve. So this was just an R that we made in our class. I had a great film professor called Vlada Petric. He was from Serbia. He had the most hilarious accent. He had some great catchphrases like, "You can learn more from a bad film than a good film," and if you turn in your paper late, you will be degraded. And I studied film adaptations of Shakespeare with him, and also oniric cinema, which means dreamlike cinema. I then decided when I graduated from college that theater was too elitist, and I wanted to work in electronic media. And I wanted to work in something that was popular and widespread. So I moved to LA. I had some contacts there. I worked for a commercial production company called White Noise. I spent about a year there. I really didn't like it. But rather than going back to theater, I decided to go even further and move to Hong Kong, where there was a new satellite television service called Star TV that had just launched. I knew some people that were working there. They were like, "There's lots of work, come over." I had massive student loans, so I couldn't afford just to pay back. So I couldn't afford just to take a year off and travel or anything like that. So I had to go somewhere so that I could work, and I wound up working in on-air promotions for Star TV. This is my ID card, I think from about 1994. So I'm going to show you some promos that I made in those early days. And I need to give you a warning that some of these have not seen the light of day for 20 years. I haven't showed them to anybody. I also, this first one that I'm going to show you, I have to say that it does contain images of Kevin Spacey. And I am so sorry that he turned out to be such a turd. But anyway, this is a product of its time. And so here's a movie promo that I made in Hong Kong. And what I learned from doing things like that was really about editing. And this was right when nonlinear editing was actually becoming something that everybody started using. So there was a software system called Lightworks, and then Avid, and Final Cut. And it really meant that unlike a theatrical production where you need lots of people to do it, as a promo producer, you're writing the script, you're editing it yourself, you're doing kind of the graphics, and there was something very satisfying about being a one-man band. And also spending time with a great movie and trying to figure out how to capture the essence of it. I'm going to show you another piece right now because I know you're asking, what about the animation? This is an animation festival. So here's the history of animation in 30 seconds. Yeah, that's obviously trying to write the promo the way that Bart or Homer would write it. I made a lot of sports promos. I wasn't a huge sports fan, but I liked the fact that the event that you're promoting hadn't happened yet. So you had to bring a lot more invention into it. You had to kind of invent some kind of conflict. There's a natural conflict, but you had to invent a story around it. Here's one. So that was a tennis promo with no tennis in it. And my creative director at the time said, because a lot of people really like the graphics in that spot. But my creative director said, those are the kind of graphics that people who don't know about graphics like. And I was very hurt by this. And then I realized, well, we're not actually broadcasting just to graphic designers, so that's probably okay. We did actually the first time I worked with original animation was also in a sports promo. So here it is. It's only 20 seconds. So we commissioned a small studio in Hong Kong to make some anime-style graphics. I got really, really sick of doing hard sell voiceovers. It was like, live Sunday, March 31st on Star Sports. Here's a really extreme example. For some reason, that didn't get through our compliance. For some reason, that was rejected by standards and practices at the time. But it just felt like the natural thing to say at the end of one of those promos. Here's a slightly softer sell. If you think the type animation in that spot is really dodgy, that's because I did it myself. And I used it as an opportunity, basically as an After Effects kind of exercise. I think there's probably just a plugin that does that automatically now, but at the time I animated each letter by itself. And I got really into kind of doing my own bits and pieces of After Effects and enjoyed that because it's basically animated Photoshop, so taking graphics and flying them around, which was great. So that was a good learning for me. So if you have to make a cheesy Baywatch promo, at least find something in it for yourself that you can learn and have some fun with it. I really thought Hong Kong was a beautiful place, and I was always kind of inspired by its built environment. And I did some personal collage artwork. This was kind of one of the apartment buildings that I lived in for a while, and the street around it. I bought a scanner and scanned everything that I could. This is like a self-portrait with my tattoo, which I will not be showing you today. And I managed to find ways to use the scanner again in some sort of broadcast design work. So this was just like little bits of film that I had lying around my flat that I scanned, and then I got the 3D guy to put some sort of glossy ray tracing glass letters over them because I didn't think that just this design on its own would hold up in the environment because my creative director wanted everything to be really shiny. So yeah, here's another one and some other work. I was pretty happy with my body of work. I'm going to show you one more montage, which was my showreel montage from 2001. So yeah, we turned the MGM Lion into the Terminator. But on the back of that, I got a job as the creative director at Cartoon Network. So I went in to do their on-air promotions and branding. That's my office. That's the lion dancer coming in to wish me good luck. And Cartoon Network for me was kind of like a university of animation. It had an amazing library. I actually got to work with Bugs Bunny. They were also making smart new cartoons. I think the thing that got me to convince that I wanted to work at Cartoon Network and in kids television was shows like Dexter's Lab and the Powerpuff Girls, which were new cartoons but were incredibly smart and fun and amazingly done. So the first thing that I had to do, my boss asked me to read a book called My Life in Toons by Joe Barbera. If you haven't read it, you want to understand TV animation. It has the great story of how they went from making Tom and Jerry 4 or 5 shorts a year into making the Flintstones, half an hour of animation a week, and why that changed what they did. I knew as a kid, like those cartoons looked a little bit different. But they kind of, it's a very, very good read about the history of TV animation. We launched a new brand in India called Pogo, which was a new channel. We had 90 days from naming the channel to getting it on air. That was pretty excited. We started doing original content for Pogo, including a co-production with Sesame Workshop called Gully Gully Sim Sim, which is the Hindi version of Sesame Street. So got to work with Sesame Workshop in New York and really understand how they work on a preschool show, on preschool shows and their curriculum focus. This is Googly and Chumky with Bollywood legend Amitabh Bachchan. These are some of the great people that I worked with. Not their real hair. We're lucky enough to have a lot of wigs in our house. So this is the wig family portrait, and this is some of my creative team from India and Hong Kong. And we started actually working on some development of original content. So we tried things like, let's have Johnny Bravo become kind of a Bollywood star. We did basically a shorts program, and we did a whole bunch of pilots. This one was about a snobby alien who lands in rural Thailand and the kind of stuff that happens there. Sulochana and the Nature Detectives is a bit like Winnie the Pooh, set in a nature reserve in southern India. Exchange Student Zero was an Australian show about a kid from an anime world who comes to an ordinary high school in Perth. Cool Vera was an Indian mythological epic with characters from the Ramayana like Arjun, Shakuni, Duryodhan, in a kind of epic before they were heroes. So when they were kids and when they were training and when they were kind of in high school, but even this is the stuff that was happening in high school, so it was pretty heavy. So I left Asia in 2008. This was a picture of me after we launched Cartoon Network Korea. It had been a very long night out. And I moved to London to work for a channel called Jetix, which then became sort of fully absorbed into Disney. What appealed to me about it was really that was more of a focus just on development, less about doing promos and really focusing on content. Of course, the first thing that was going through the pipeline at that stage was a Canadian show called Kid vs. Cat. Years later, we're still making shows about cats. I think they're getting better. This is a show called Counterfeit Cats. And we had the opportunity to work on a show called Randy Cunningham, 9th Grade Ninja, which was animated in Ireland at Boulder. We worked with Passion Pictures on the title sequence, made 2 seasons of that. We had a shorts program about football. One of those shorts called Good as Gold by Tom Grant and Martin Woolley, also known as the Spin Kick Brothers, won a BAFTA. So that was kind of cool for Best Original Short Form. So that was 2016. I wanted to talk very quickly before I finished about some projects that never happened. It's kind of taboo to talk about development and to talk about development failure, and yet most of development is failure. And it is about, successful development is really just learning to fail again and again and again, and to learn from it, and to give yourself the resilience to keep going. And there's lots and lots of reasons why things don't happen. This one was about 2 stepsisters who were very different. So it was a stepsisters odd couple kind of show from UK creators and a French studio called Je suis bien content. We were told at the time that we could not have an animated series with 2 girl lead characters, which I think was kind of crazy. And I hope we're beyond that now. This was really long time ago, like 2010. So So it was before Frozen came out, right? So maybe we're I hope we're in a different world. What we got from this though was a working relationship with the studio Je suis bien content and some of the talent there, and we made a show with them called Boyster, and Best Bugs Forever is with them now. So it really was a great way to get to know that studio. We also worked with Cartoon Saloon on a pilot called The Trouble with Ricky Doom, which was really a rom-com. And I think what we learned is that trying to do an animated rom-com on Disney Channel, because it was about like a nice girl and a bad boy, and sort of the tension between them, it wasn't the right medium. And it wasn't really right for our audience. It was a little too sophisticated, and probably would have been better off as a live-action show. Joe Giant was a really cool show about a kid who can turn into a giant. If you think it's a little bit Hulk-like, it totally is. But again, we got to work with a great studio in France called Intinto. We also tried to develop Donald Duck as an action hero. It was a really cool little animation test, but is he a duck or is he an action hero, right? It was neither fish nor fowl. This is one of my favorite things that never happened, which is called Hood, which is about like mutant teenagers with superpowered hoodies saving the world. But what happened was Disney bought Marvel. And all of a sudden, we were no longer developing any action shows. And it had nothing to do with us. It had nothing to do with the creator. It's important to understand that sometimes things don't happen because of much larger issues than anything that you're working on, and you can be gazumped by your own company sometimes. So really, the focus since then has been on comedy. And then, of course, with Lucas and Star Wars, even more so, our focus is really on comedy. So we shelved all of our action ideas. Tried to work with Aardman for many, many years. We had a great project in development called Monkey, Duck, and Stoat from a creator called Rich Weber. Again, despite all the best will in the world, it's sometimes difficult to get two companies to agree on how to play together. And there are, unfortunately, sometimes business reasons you can't control why you can't make the show. But this was a particular favorite. This was another animated trio from a small studio in Korea. Same thing. We made a great pilot, but just couldn't figure out the co-production model that was going to work successfully for this kind of show. We worked with an artist called James Jarvis on an original series called Green Park Coach Stars. We really wanted to make a show that was not only made in London, but set in London, because we're all there. We're working with shows all over the place, but we weren't actually making anything in London. So we thought this was kind of our chance. We made a great pilot with a director called Paul Lazelle and Passion Pictures. But again, there were lots of reasons why it didn't quite work. I think it was probably a little bit too sophisticated and a little bit too specific. But we got to work with Passion Pictures again, and that led to some other things, which is pretty cool. We also worked on a pilot called My Big Red Heads with the good people of Lufus Films, we're just down the road from me in North London. What came out of this one was getting to know a very talented director called Miklos Weigert, who we asked to direct a pilot for 101 Dalmatians. So you got to find something that you can learn from everything that doesn't work. So super quickly, just to wrap up, when we try to look at things that will work, what are we looking for? When we're looking for the next big idea, there's kind of four main questions that we look at. Like, what is it really about underneath it? This is Vampirina. It's a girl who's a vampire. Actually, deep down, it's kind of about being different from everybody and moving to a town where everybody's different. So it's a preschool show that's actually kind of about the immigrant experience. I mean, it actually has some sort of point to it. So make sure you really look underneath what the show's about and trying to find the meaning in there. Also, think about the execution. Gravity Falls was the first of many shows that were about kids who move to a small town where spooky stuff happens. We've been pitched that show a lot. We will be pitched that show again. This was just kind of a really great version of it. Coco was not the first film about the Day of the Dead. Jorge Gutierrez did a great film called Book of Life, but Coco just did it incredibly well. So don't be afraid to work with an old idea if you have something new some new approach to it or some new take on it. Great art comes from great artists. It's obviously all about the talent. Think about the people that are actually going to make the show. That's a big decider. But ultimately, go back to your audience and think about who you're making it for. What are you trying to do with the show? Are you actually trying to just sell toys? Are you trying to tell stories that are going to help kids understand their lives and speak to them in a way that's relevant? So what are you really trying to do? What's the purpose of what you got underneath it? So just to recap my little journey, for me, theater is incredibly important. Editing, post-production, promos, always thinking about graphics and design. Really, since 2001, it's been all about animation for me. But ultimately, trying to find some sort of purpose underneath what you're doing. So whether it's realizing that you're just doing it in order to learn a specific technique or process, or actually realizing that the whole enterprise you're working on has a larger purpose out there in the world that goes beyond its commercial objective, you will be much more happy and much more engaged and much better at what you do if you can identify the meaning underneath it and why it matters. And that is all I have to say for now. I love this quote from over 1,000 years ago, which is, don't raise your children the way your parents raised you. They were born for a different time. This is really just a reminder that you are not your audience, and kids are different from what you were like. You obviously need to connect with your inner child, but recognize that everything changes all the time. Thank you very much. Fortunately, I'm nearly out of time because I don't want to answer any questions.
What has been your favorite project What has been your favorite project or show to work on?
My favorite project to work, I think that I think I was pretty. The show called Counterfeit Cat took a long time from development, and I was just so happy that it was such a winding journey that it had many false starts. I was very happy just to see it get made and get to see it get made well. But I think the short answer to that question is it's whatever I'm working on now. It's the latest thing. So currently, it's 101 Dalmatian Street. It's the biggest project we've ever done. It's kind of the most exciting. It has so much talent on it. It's slightly frightening in its scale, but that's also the good thing about it. So I think I'm lucky enough that every project that's the big new thing is the favorite project that I'm working on. And I think you have to think about it that way because you look back at those old promos and like, at the time I thought they were so cool. And now I look at them and it's like, nope, the thing that I'm making next is gonna be way cooler than that, so.
Hi, I was wondering, do you have any advice for people, or especially students that are first-time pitchers? What do you expect going into the room and what to prepare for?
The best pitch is really a conversation. So do everything you can to understand who you're pitching to, because it really is about understanding what they're looking for and what they need. So I think, as somebody who sees a lot of pitches, I always try to activate my empathy device to kind of understand where the person is coming from that's talking to me. But I think it needs to work both ways. Don't pitch people when they're tired, bored, stressed out, miserable, that kind of thing. Make sure that there's a human connection underneath it, and that it is actually a real conversation. And that don't do yourself the disservice by trying to pitch in less than ideal situations. It doesn't have to be a formal situation. It doesn't mean you have to have a meeting in a private room and all that stuff, but just make sure there's a real connection and a conversational moment, because ultimately it's a relationship. It's like a first date. And if your pitch works, you could be spending years with these people, right? So make sure that you start on a good foot. Also, understand that the person you're pitching to is not able to just hand you a briefcase full of cash. right? So the person you're pitching to is going to have to go to bat for you. So you're going to have to convince them to then go back to somebody else and pitch your thing for you. So you have to make them an ally, right? You have to get them on your team, get them on your side, convince them that what you're doing is awesome, and then you become a team and you work to push it forward together. It's absolutely not adversarial, it's teamwork.
Thank you.
Thanks, Orion. Do you have time to expand a little bit on the kind of audience demographics that the different Disney channels are serving?
It's really kids and families. I mean, it's kids first and their families. The broad demo is sort of 4 to 14. If you look at Disney Junior, the sweet spot is in a kind of 4 to 6 range, and Disney Channel, Disney XD is kind of 6 to 11. But a 6-year-old and an 11-year-old are really, really different. I tend to always develop for the upper end of the demo that you're talking to, because the younger kids will come along and you don't want anything to feel too young or too babyish. So I think for Disney Channel work right now, I kind of think of a smart 10-year-old that I know and make it for them. And it's much easier to think about my niece or my nephew than it is to think about like a broad group of 6 to 11s in many territories. You have to keep it kind of personal. Please.
Thank you. Just thinking about we've established the demographic, but what do you think? But what about in terms of a formula with these shows? Do people tend to look for shows with a certain formula, or do they like to sort of find ways to sort of break the mold, but while at the same time keeping the same demographic?
There's definitely not a formula. I think what is common is that you want something that your audience can relate to. So some people call it an entry point. Some people just call it a character that you identify with because you want to be on their journey. You want to be like them and have them be your friends. So I think the core of it is really about characters that you want to get to know and hang out with. And great characters will work in different formats and different platforms. They might work in a short. They might work in a movie. They might work in a series. So starting with it's always about starting with character, and then it's putting them into stories that have some real emotional ups and downs, and ideally a whole bunch of laughs associated with it. So that does lead. It kind of sometimes does lead you to something that looks like a formula. But it really isn't, and we would always prefer to find something that is both incredibly original and fresh, but feels universal in a way that a lot of people will relate to. That's always the challenge.
Cool, thanks.
Do you think there's a growing anime influence when ideas are being pitched now to Disney? Like, do you have a
growing anime influence?
Yeah.
I think there's lots of different kinds of anime influences. It was interesting when we did a show called Boyster, which was very inspired by shows like Doraemon and Shin-Chan. That in countries where they liked Doraemon and Shin-Chan, Boyster worked incredibly well as a series. But in Northern Europe and places where they didn't have that sort of broad tradition of those kind of shows, it didn't work so well. It came from a French creator, but he loved that kind of stuff and put a lot into it. I don't see a growing influence of it, though. No, I don't. And I haven't seen a big breakout new Japanese series for a long time in terms of being a broad kid series, really since Yokai Watch. Which was kind of there and then not there. So there are still some pockets in the world where people really dig anime, and I'm hoping there will be more because I'm a huge fan myself, but you just haven't seen them break out in a big way lately.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. Who wants the last question? She got here first.
How far did those projects that didn't make it how far into development did you get, and when did you know they weren't going to be?
Most of them had pilots, and there would be at least an animation test or a full episode animatic, sometimes a color animatic. So we actually had something that we could put in front of an audience and test. So that was, some of them were just, PK Duck was just an animation test. We didn't do any more than that, but most of them were pilots. Yeah, so they got pretty far. Some of them had further post-pilot development where we continued to work on it because we thought it was almost there, and if we just do a little bit more work on it, we can get over the line. That works a lot of the time. Every successful show has post-pilot development, right? It's very rare that you just get like, pilot's perfect, go make it. There's always, you always learn from the pilot because there's always mistakes in the pilot, and then you iterate further and further. So sometimes when a pilot lands in a gray area, you think, all right, we believe in it, let's keep working on it. So maybe some more scripts, maybe some more bits and pieces. It's painful, and sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it does, though. So it's always worth doing.
Could you go back to those projects and work on them at a later
Some of them no longer sit with us. They've gone back to the rights have all flowed back to the creators. Some of them could go back, but you know, you gotta look forwards. I mean, there's a reason why people don't talk about failed development, because you don't want to live in the past and you don't want to dwell on your mistakes. I think it's always healthy to figure out what you learn from them, but you got to keep working on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Cool. Thank you very much, everyone.